Whoa. All right, guys. Dani Williamson, it is Sunday night. So you know that means it's Sunday night service. And you are not going to believe who I have on here tonight. Dr. Nasha Winters, who wrote the Metabolic Approach to Cancer right here, which I'm telling you, I believe hands down is the best book I've ever read in functional medicine, healthcare. It is everything that I believe in. And I'm just honored and thrilled to have you here tonight. And guys, as soon as you get logged on, I need you to hit your heart buttons. I need you to show her some love. Tell us where you're from and share this with your friends. Okay. And I'm going to talk about 2 or 3 minutes here about Dr. Nasha and about, what she does for a living. And then we're going to let her take it off here with us, because I'm going to tell you, this woman is a powerhouse. And we are logging on late tonight because she's in Southern California with the wildfires, right?
Jeez. Maybe it's my wildness doing, I don't know, but it's bad.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh my Lord. So I first met this woman, I think it was in Scotland for the International Low Dose Naltrexone Conference several years ago. I took my son and we went over there for that. And then I saw her again last year in Portland at the Low Dose Naltrexone Conference, because I'm a huge proponent of LDN and I've been a fan of her. She's been like my girl crush for a really long time. And I didn't know about her book. I learned about her book when it first came out from a man who supplies pasture-raised eggs, Roger McDonald, in my office. And he said, you've got to read this book. And we talked about your book at the Hashimoto's meeting I run. And so today, when I was listening to a podcast with her, she said 3 things that made me just fall in love with her. She said, well, that's just lipstick on a pig, or something similar to that. That's just lipstick on a pig. And she said, well, that's utterly bullshit on a podcast, which is, I fell in love with her immediately. And then she said, she loves Schitt's Creek. And I was like, well, get it. There we go. So here she is tonight. But let me I'm going to tell you a little bit about her and a little bit about her story. No, she's going to tell her own story. That's her story to tell. But she is a global healthcare authority, hands down, and a best-selling author, absolutely, in integrative cancer care and research. She's a licensed naturopath doctor and a fellow on the American Board of Naturopathic Oncology. She's a global healthcare authority in integrative cancer research. She's a sought-after speaker. She consults with other physicians, other healthcare providers, and patients, and she has educated hundreds of professionals throughout the years on the use of mistletoe, and has created all kinds of programs out there for providers and for the lay people as well. She's currently focused, and I can't wait to hear about this, on opening up a comprehensive metabolic oncology hospital and research institute in the United States. Oh my goodness, we're the best standard of care where she's offering the best standard of care, and she has the most advanced integrative therapies that they will be offered. Oh my goodness. And this facility will be a residential setting on a gorgeous campus with a backdrop of regenerative medicine and EMF mitigation. Holy cow. Retreat center. Oh my goodness. I'm so honored, guys. So, yes, I see people are logged on. Guys, tell us where you're from. While you're still logging on, we're going to go through a couple of statistics from this book. Okay. Chapter 2, I think it is. I didn't know that the first cancers were discovered over 1.6 million years ago. I had no idea.
Yeah.
Dr. Nasha, 300 BC was the first written record of cancer. Almost half of the United States population will have cancer. Almost half. 1,600 people a day die daily in the United States of cancer. That's over 584,000 people a year. Cancer cases have steadily increased the past 150 years. 1 in 20 at the beginning of the 19th century had cancer, or would get cancer. 1 in 16 in the 40s, 1 in 10 in the 70s. In 1960, breast cancer affected 1 in 20 women, and by 2016, that rose to 1 in 8 women. Listen to this statistic. 1/2 of all men and 1/3 of all women will develop cancer in their lifetime. Again, 1/2 of all men and 1/3 of all women will develop cancer in their lifetime. This is also not a disease of aging. And this is traumatic to me and tragic. Children are being diagnosed with cancers at alarming rates, for sure. From the 1980s to the early 90s, cancer incidence in children under the age of 10 rose by 37%. It's the number 2 cause of death after accidents in children. There was a 2016 study that found that malignant brain tumors are the number 1 cause of cancer-related deaths in American adolescents, ages 15 to 19. And I suspect this is a big piece of it. Correct? Yeah. This book, that tiny little 2 minutes worth of info right there, this book is loaded with, 300 and something pages of just like that. Thank you for being here. Thank you.
Thank you.
And
yeah.
I want you to share, and we've got all kinds of people on here tonight. So no, it's not going away, Mary. It's not. And so we're going to, tonight is the beginning for us to be able to talk about what do we do? What do we do if we get the diagnosis? What do we do to prevent it? Cancer is I'm saying that prematurely. Well, of course it's a disease of prevention, right? My mother has dementia and has Alzheimer's. Nasha, you don't know that, and I always tell people that's a disease of prevention, because once you get it, and it's the same with cancer. I guess there's no cure for cancer.
Correct.
Right. So welcome. You get talking. I've been talking for 7 minutes. You tell us. Thank you so much.
Well, first of all, thank you for letting me be part of your tribe tonight. This is such an honor. A very good one. And number 2, I love, like you, I remember meeting you with our LDN tribe, which is very similar in its sort of vibration, if you will, of what we're passionate about, what we're looking at. And also, it is hard to start a conversation like this. It's almost like we have to lay down the groundwork. We have to sort of give the bad news first before we dive into, okay, what the heck do we do about it? Because that's the reality is it can be really grim. And there's definitely a camp of people out there, specifically an entire group of researchers out there in the world, but a really well-known group at Harvard, actually, that is literally out there telling folks that this is just a Russian roulette game, a game of chance. There's nothing you can do about it. You're a sitting duck and you're totally powerless. Wow. And that group is the Tomasetti and the I can't believe I just forgot his other name, but it's the Tomasetti group at Harvard that's all about still cancer as a genetic disorder, but one of influences that are out of our control. Now, that actually makes me really angry, and it's funny because they bring these every couple of years we get a study out of their department that says this. Now, ironically, right down the hallway from the same group of people, or on the campus, I don't know if it's literally down the hall, but on the same campus in the same academic institution are another group of scientists and researchers that are catching up with the times and finding cohorts and colleagues around the world sharing their sentiment that this is far more in our control than we're being led to believe. That this really is something that is beyond our genetics, that really is about something is preventable, as you alluded to with your mother and conditions of our times. And that's where I like to put my attention. It's like, okay, yeah, we've got some really bad stats landing on us today. And they're pretty grim. They're pretty grim, right? And so even that statistic you gave in my book that we turned into the publisher November 2016 was published May 2017 and became available. Since then, it's now 1 in 2.4 women. It's less than a third of women will have cancer in their lifetime in the United States, and a half of men. So yeah, these stats are getting worse even as we're putting our paper into print, right? It's pretty atrocious to me. So let's talk about why. All right. And we've had, as you noted early on in your beautiful introduction for me, grateful, by the way, that cancer's always been around. We have evidence of it over 1 million years ago in fossil, collections. We know around the time of the Egyptians that there was the first writings found on cancer. We know that it moved into like the Greek and Roman era and into all of these different eras over basically millennia. So it's always been part of our ethos and part of our physiology. So we've known it's been out there. And yet, here we are, we've gone through probably 24 theories of what cancer is over the past, say, 2,000 years. We've gone through multiple theories in the past 100 years. And those theories are just that. They're not changing our outcomes, right? So we also keep treating it very much as a tumor or a tumor cell process, or not even process, as a tumor or tumor cell thing. And that, to me, is where I think this conversation starts, because it's not a thing. It's not an event. It's not like you go to bed one night without cancer and you wake up the next morning and you have it. It's not how it works, right? In fact, there are plenty of studies showing that the average cancer process takes anywhere from 7 to 10 years before it's big enough and loud enough to capture your attention. There's also plenty of studies showing that we, on average, go through about 7 cancer processes in our lifetime, unbeknownst to us. Our body is just wise enough to be able to deal with it. We are literally correcting millions of hits to our DNA every single day, thanks to the amazing body that's wrapped around all of that and this amazing blessed gift that we've been given. We know how to do this. But when we accumulate like tons and tons of things that are affecting the way our body can protect our DNA and repair that DNA every single day, some of us even before we even left the womb and entered into this world, it becomes more and more challenging to keep that DNA damage at bay and to keep cancer at bay. And so that's where my whole premise of the book, the Metabolic Approach to Cancer, talks about the main 10 patterns that I talk about here, the terrain 10, that seem to be the drops in that mitochondrial bucket that can accumulate over time and make you much more vulnerable to the world around us today. All right. And so knowing that, I literally probably every person listening, in fact, I'm seeing a few familiar faces and names. Hey, Doc Rojo, how are you? It's really cool to see folks coming in here. But
I love doing this live. I know you do a lot of podcasts and all, and I love it live because you get you just never know what's going to happen.
I love it. Well, it makes my heart happy because I get to see people that there you go. Cheers to that. People that I know and love and support. And in fact, you've got a couple of doctors on tonight that are in my current program being trained in these methods and this critical path forward to help patients through the cancer wilderness. So you've got some great resources that are literally in training right now on how to change the cancer conversation that we're hoping that your listeners will come back to in December once they all graduate and learn more about that. But you've got a couple in your neck of the woods. So I got one of your doctors on here right from the Tennessee area, as well as one from South Carolina. So we've got some showing up in your neck of the woods. So hold tight. There's more coming with these ideas. And some of them are even standard of care oncologists, which gets me very excited.
Yes.
In fact, if we get an opportunity for any of them to pipe up, what they've said to me, the oncologists that have joined this movement to explore those drops in the bucket we're going to talk about, they're frankly tired of seeing the same outcomes, applying the same tools and having the same poor outcomes. We've barely moved the needle on the dial over all of these years. And we get super excited and we tell people, wow, we're making a dent. The only dent we're making is we're diagnosing people earlier. Right. What is not clear, and what many of us suspect, is that it doesn't change our survival rate one iota. And if anything, some studies suggest that the overdiagnosis and overtreatment may actually be hastening our demise. So it's not to say that standard of care is bad or bad at all times. It's that we need to be rethinking the way we approach it. So let's talk about those drops in the bucket momentarily. Because people always tell me, I was healthy until I got cancer.
Right.
Or I was healthy until I got Alzheimer's, or I was healthy until I had X, Y, and Z. And let me tell you, whether it's Alzheimer's, whether it's diabetes, obesity, whether it's cancer, cardiovascular disease, chronic fatigue syndrome, any of those conditions are damaged mitochondria, plain and simple. And it is, as you noted, a lifetime of choices around our diet and our lifestyle and our stress habits and our emotional habits and the people we surround ourselves with and the career choices we make, but also things we don't have control over, like what's in our environment unbeknownst to us. For all of you living in that Eastern Seaboard area, you're exposed to some of the biggest toxins in our world. We have some of the hottest hotspots for cancer all along the Mississippi Delta and all along the Atlantic coast. If you look at the demographics of where cancer is in this country, in the United States specifically, some of the highest incidence and the highest population findings are all along that Mississippi Delta. And that's so terrifying and sad to me because it's just a giant cesspool of toxins into our environment. They're now persistent, meaning you don't just do like a weekend detox and you're good to go. These are things that go in and stay in your body for years, if not decades, causing all kinds of quiet, silent destruction to the way your body can process those other hits that come at it every day. And eventually it topples under that load. And so in the drops of the bucket, we explore your epigenetics. So basically 12 generations above you have some say in how your body's proclivities, your propensities, what are your predispositions? Not to say that you're a sitting duck or powerless in this, but it is good to know, be aware. Like Dani, you having a mother with Alzheimer's, typically that's a very common familial thread. Yes. But we also understand Alzheimer's to be like the genetics of that are genetics that we can overcome. So many of our genetics are genetics that can be altered in their expression with our diet and our lifestyles.
You bet.
Right?
Bet.
And so cancer, cardiovascular disease, obesity, diabetes, Alzheimer's, all of these are basically sugar, metabolism problems.
You bet.
Big time. And we all think we don't eat much sugar until you put the pen to the paper or run one of those Chronometer or MyFitnessPal, macronutrient counts, and you start to realize, whoosh, I just had 3 days worth of sugar at breakfast. My quote unquote ADA approved breakfast of champions, heart healthy breakfast, is about as much sugar as it gets. And we're starting to recognize now more than ever that cardiovascular disease is not a problem of fats, it's a problem of sugar and inflammation. So those are some things. So we're looking at the epigenetic tendencies of which our dietary and lifestyle choices can change. I've alluded now to the metabolic, the fuel choices that your cells use from your food, but also sugar's coming from our food and from our industrialized food products, and the fact that we've really moved from what we called normal carbohydrate intake in the Western world in the 1850s, we now call low carb today because we've gotten so far from that since the Industrial Food Revolution. We're on average from the 1850s, we took in 5 pounds of sugar per person per year.
Yes.
Today, and I know a lot of your listeners have heard this quote, but you want to tell them, Dani, what the bad news is of how much we take in per person per year?
I think it's about 152 pounds a year. Is that correct?
That was the last study that's in the book. The latest is closer to 175 to 180. What? So we're getting better with this knowledge. We're getting worse. It's almost like the more despair we have in our world, the more sugar we cram into our throats. It's like it's a coping mechanism to deal with the lack of sweetness in our life, I think. And boy, howdy, these last few months, you and I were joking beforehand. It's like, it's tough. It's tough when you're met with such despair, when you're met with such overwhelm and isolation. We tend to self-soothe, and we tend to self-soothe with things that we're drawn to initially, but they have repercussions. And that's what we're seeing a lot in our world today.
You bet. And, and just to interrupt you for a second, I know you've probably seen this with your patients as well. I was so hoping that we would use this 20 weeks, 25, however many weeks we've had here, to really reset things and to get in the kitchen and to start cooking one ingredient food, right? And it happened during an amazing time, during the farmer's market season, right? Well, the farmer's market, 52 weeks, but summer season. And, I'm seeing my patients, they feel terrible. They are not eating well. They're eating processed, packaged, bagged, canned comfort food, And many of us missed the boat. Now, I cooked a lot more than I normally do, but I've eaten more sugar than normal as well. And it's so sad.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because that was my hope as well. In fact, I wrote a little commentary back in it's a blog on my website. If people want to go read it, my thoughts haven't changed much since March, by the way. But what I did allude to in the beginning was we have a chance here. Like COVID is a wake up call, much like cancer or anything else. And it's almost like everyone put on their their sound canceling headsets and just zoned out in front of Netflix instead, in the last few months. That's what, unfortunately, majority of us have done. Some of us have kind of kicked up gear, which I'm really glad to see. But even me who knows better, me who preaches out there in this, I imbibe in good quality, low glycemic alcohol, celebratory on occasion. But what I found myself doing in the last few months of isolation, where my normal social experiences where I found fun and frivolity and joy and camaraderie, became having more of a nightly cocktail with my husband, or a Zoom cocktail party, or somehow alcohol started to insidiously find its way into our world more than ever before. And we were really minimal users. I've drank more in the last 6 months than I've drank in the last 6 years cumulatively. And so I was just telling Dani before, when I saw her raise her toast, I'm like, I'm on a little bit of a break right now, just to reset myself, because I know that tendency. I recognize my own fragility and vulnerability in the times that we're in, and that it is very easy and very seductive to be like, just hand me another margarita. So I want to also honor to your listeners, this is not me saying, oh, don't do that, because I'm pointing the finger at myself, you guys, in this process, that I am recognizing my own places. I'm finding myself way more engaged on social media. I'm trying to make it I'm trying to reframe it to bring positive energy and education into the world. And I'm trying to muffle out the background bad noise that hurts my brain and hurts my heart. And so I'm trying to reframe even that, but it's times that I'm spending way more on there. So, I think that's really key for us. Was we start to dive into the other drops, you'll start to recognize how these patterns are also not in silos. So when we talk, for instance, about the sugar impact, we also talk about the environmental impact. We alluded to that with just even where you live, right there in a part of the country that's on the scale of, all of our 50 states. Unfortunately, the southeast part of the country comes out at the bottom of the list in healthcare, which is ridiculous. It's like, that is like literally the heart and soul and roots of our world, along some of the most lush riverland and everything, and we're killing it. We're poisoning it, and then it's poisoning us to boot. So that is what makes me sad. And then we move into the microbiome drop in the bucket. Oh my word. Where do we even begin there? Like, you are what you eat, but also what the animals are eating or ingesting, which is the glyphosates that destroy the microbiome, the antibiotics that are treating these CAFO, these giant factory farmed and animal products, the antibiotics we take willy-nilly just preventatively when we go up traveling abroad, or, oh, you have a little ear infection, better take an antibiotic. These are the way we've reacted instead of responding to the fact that our body wants to have a diverse microbiome. We just do everything in our power to monoculture it, to like eradicate it down to nothing. And diversity is our superpower when it comes to our microbiome. And we've like monocropped our foods, and therefore we've monocropped our bodies, and we've made ourselves very vulnerable on all levels. But in particular, in the next bucket drop is the immune system.
Yes.
Yeesh. I mean, my gosh. Good. I love it. Thank you for She's keeping me on track here, folks. It's good because I can go all over the place. I'm not very linear. And so with that, it's like our immune system is something that I'm looking at labs now in patients. I haven't for 30 years, but we are all worried about COVID, and we're worried about these other illnesses. And yet, instead of screening people for the virus, I wish we'd screen people for their general immune function, which is a $12 out of pocket going to a direct to consumer lab draw, like a Direct Labs or a My Labs or any of those, and just running a basic CBC, because your CBC, your complete blood count, is going to tell me exactly how prone you are to something like this virus. So if your white blood cells are chronically below 5, you are dealing with a chronic co-infection, heavy metals, chronic stress. Basically, your immune system isn't working. If your neutrophils are more than 2 times of your lymphocytes, you have an immune system that isn't working. Also, if you have more neutrophils, more than 2 to 1 of neutrophils to lymphocytes, that's right there by itself a major risk factor for COVID. But also all chronic illness and all-cause mortality. If you don't believe me, Google it, PubMed it. Go and type in neutrophil to lymphocyte ratio and all-cause mortality, or prognosis, or relationship to cancer, or relationship to COVID, or diabetes, or any long list of chronic illnesses that you might be facing. And you will see that I'm not making this up, right? And then we look at platelets. If your platelets are very low, that's one problem. But most of the time in issues of cancer, in cardiovascular disease and COVID and Alzheimer's, our platelets are actually elevated above 250, is showing this propensity towards thick, sticky blood. It also shows harboring of viruses and other things. This is a $12 test. Everyone should go out and have this. Right there, that's going to tell you what you need to work on. Because if your immune system isn't working, you've got to look at all the causes, the other drops in the bucket we're talking about here. So really, really important to be looking at. And then that segues into some of the other drivers of all of these disease conditions that we're facing right now, which is inflammation. We're like known as the inflammation nation, right? And so, you know, I always wonder, like, how many patients listening in right now, or just people, you don't have to be patients, how many of you just have your doctors routinely check your C-reactive protein? And if you don't have a doctor that does that, it's time for you to hire a new doctor.
Or a new nurse practitioner.
There you go. New doctor, nurse practitioner, frankly, life coach.
You bet. Yes.
Or go do it yourself. Go run your own day.
You know, I tell my patients this every day. I work for you. If I'm not doing the job, then you fire me. And if your provider's not doing the job, you fire them because they work for you. You're not the doctor. You're not the nurse. You're not the physician's assistant. You know, you're not that, but you know your body better than anyone will ever know if you're in tune with your body. And if you're not in tune with your body, I recommend you get in tune with your body. I say this every day to people. Look, I work for you. What do you want from me? Let me see what I ask them. I mean, I don't ask them what labs. I mean, if they want specific labs, I mean, I'll do that. But, you know, ask your patients, for those of you that are providing, you know, what do you want? I mean, why are you here?
Yes. Right. Yeah. Well, and what's so beautiful is, first of all, you alluded to something I've heard said over and over, and I'm going to steal it for just a moment. I don't know where the credit lands on, but if you guys know, tell me. But I love that concept of that we are the CEO of our body. Yes. And that our doctors, our nurse practitioners, our therapists, our nutritionists, they're our board members. They advise us. They help give us some feedback, but they're our board members. They don't run the show. And I love, like, and speaking of running the show, Terry, who just posted her massive drop in C-reactive protein in a matter of months, was because she was the CEO of her own life. She took charge of doing the audit on her own life, probably looked in her cabinets. As I always tell people, Terry, if you ever invited me over to your house for dinner, I'm going to be looking in your medicine cabinet. I'm going to be looking at your refrigerator and your pantry. I'm going to be looking under your sink. I might even snoop around your garage and your shed. I want to see what toxins you are putting onto your body. If I walk into somebody's house, I know right away if I'm exposed to toxins. If I smell fragrance, I'm almost out of there. I get a massive headache. Unplug those light fixtures. Get rid of those scented candles unless you've made them, from scratch on your own with all natural products. You know, things like this. This is what's so amazing. I'm the person who gets into a taxi or an Uber and grabs that thing off the rearview mirror and tosses it out the window. I'm like, get this stuff out of there. Ugh. Yeah.
Yes. Well, that's funny that you just said that. You're going to be looking in the cabinet, because next week, this lady right here, Mary Chavinko, is my guest on here. And she's all about healing your body from the outside in, your lotion, your makeup, your hair color, your lipstick. She's an expert in our local area here on this. So Mary,
thank you. Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, hopefully, she'll be telling you. If this is her cup of tea, this is going to be her telling you that we have millions of mouths on our skin, largest organ of absorption. And yet before we even get out of the shower and out the door for work, we're usually putting 15 to 20 different toxic products on our skin. Yeah. It's like we're smothering ourselves in toxicity. And people are like, gosh, I don't understand why I have cancer. And then I look at their laundry list of cleaning products, body care products, the Febreze they're spraying around their house, the glyphosate they're trying to eradicate the weeds in their front yard. I'm like, oh my word. It's like, it's amazing that you didn't get it sooner is what I'm always shocked by.
You were 19. You were 19. Yeah. So when I look back and I think, and you didn't share your story, but when I think about what I put on me at 19,
gosh,
I mean, teenagers, I mean, it's unbelievable what, they walk into Bath and Body, which I don't care. I mean, nobody from Bath and Body's listening to me, but that's the most toxic place I've ever seen.
It is.
I'm cleaning out my mom's stuff right now. I mean, she's still alive, but I'm working on cleaning out things. There's Bath and Body stuff everywhere. And some of it I had bought her years.
Right. We all did. We all invested in the Body Shop.
Very awesome. I loved it. I used to love it. I'd plug it in my walls. Yes.
Oh yeah. It's probably my biggest thing. You got to remember, I was a child of the 80s.
Yes.
So my senior picture, it's all about the bangs. And of course that means unbelievable. I probably had stock in Aquanet.
You bet.
And so toxic. In fact, interesting. This is again, me knowing what I know today, I'm always testing out my products through all the different websites, making sure they're clean. And I have like this short, sassy haircut, but I also have very fine hair. So a little bit of styling product is necessary to keep this puppy moving. And I just got back lab tests recently that showed acrylamide levels off the charts. And I'm like, I don't eat charred meat. I don't eat French fries. Where am I getting this from? And lo and behold, I started looking at my products and I was using a very known super green hair company that has everything organic in there, and realized that the main ingredient of these hairsprays is acrylamide. Oh. So despite everything else cleaned out, I've gotten rid of it. So I'm going to retest myself in 3 months coming off of this, but I have a feeling that's where my toxic exposure was. And that's just insane to me, because if you look at toxicity of acrylamide, it is a well-known carcinogen. Plus, I unfortunately have many epigenetic hiccups that make acrylamide exposure in my body invoke cancering like a mofo. And so I don't need any more of that in my life. I've already been through those flaming hoops multiple times. So I'm always, again, like awareness. Here now, I'm nearly 30 years into this process. It'll be 29 years, October 21st, 2021, when I was diagnosed 29 years ago with terminal ovarian cancer, right? And here I am, clearly not terminal. At least, actually, let me take it out. We're all terminal, but not from their expiration date they planned on stamping on me. But I'm still learning things for myself today. So please have your folks understand and know that this is not something you just go, I've got this all figured out, it's done. I'm a work in progress, just like the rest of you. I'm learning along with everybody. So after inflammation, we have circulation and angiogenesis. And this is about how we breathe, how we move and circulate the fluid and the blood throughout our body, our lymphatics, our oxygen transfer, the way our bodies will grow new vessels to cancer processes. If we're hypoxic, being low in oxygen, if you don't exercise, you're hypoxic. If you've got any problems of blood pressure, too high or too low, you're typically hypoxic. If you've had any radiation in your body ever, you've got some areas of hypoxia. There's so many things that lead to this, and further inflammation adds to this as well, and oxidation from eating too much sugar, and you start to see how the drops in the bucket all blend. They come in as individual drops, but they blend in the liquid of it all. And then we have hormones. Holy cow, we are swimming in a toxic cesspool of exogenous endocrine disrupting xenoestrogen hormones today that no one is frankly hormone deficient. Okay. If anything, we're all hormone metabolizing messed up, and we're putting more insult to injury with all the stuff from the outside, putting it in, be it your plastics, be it your metalloestrogens from metals you're being exposed to, be it glyphosate, that's a neuroendocrine disruptor. And here comes a big one. Be it your hormone replacement therapy, even if it's natural or bioidentical. By the way, bioidentical does not mean natural. It just means that it's so close to matching your own mimicry of your own hormones that it binds to your receptor sites more forcefully than your own hormones do. That's what bioidentical hormones mean. They're not natural by any means. In fact, they're about 100 times more potent and more unnatural. So No one in the realm of hormone replacement therapy likes me because I speak up to this all the time. And then I see all the different studies basically saying I'm telling lies. But I don't see lies when I have patients in front of me, when we can put all the pieces together, when I'm looking at their labs, when I'm running their Dutch panels, when I'm looking at their epigenetics to say a CYP1B1 SNP plus a COMT SNP plus an MAO SNP basically means you don't metabolize hormones of any kind, even your own. So you definitely can't handle anything exogenously. And those are the patients that someday will have the right to sue you when you're giving them those things, because it's so well characterized. I see it every single time. I can almost guess now when I'm seeing someone what their SNPs are just based on their cancer type and their age and where they live and when they started those things, because I just watch these patterns. So if you're someone who's taking these, you need to do a deeper dive into your own terrain. You need to audit yourself, just like you're under your kitchen sink and in your medicine cabinet, and start to explore how your body metabolizes these things. Don't take your doctor's word for it. Don't take a blood test is not the way to check your hormones, by the way. In fact, you shouldn't see your hormones in your blood. It should be in receptor sites or out of your body. So if you do actually see hormones in your blood and their doctors are treating your blood for hormones, that's dangerous, because now if you start to see hormones in there, that's actually becoming pathologic. So we want to make sure you're metabolizing those right. So if you are taking these things, you want to work with someone who's very expert, who's checking your hormones every 3 months, especially if you have a family history of cancer. But today, it doesn't even matter if you have a family history of cancer. Right. 1 in 2.4 women, 1 in 2 men are going to have it in their lifetime. So you don't want to turn on any more growth factors. You need to be exploring your terrain and understanding what makes you tick. And if you do have to use hormones for whatever reason, for whatever situation, please don't use it to replace a function. Use it quickly, get in, get out, and restore the function, and then move on. But as one of my colleagues, she just wrote a great book that's now out on Kindle and soon to be on paper, Dr. Mindy Peltz, she talks about what I've been saying to patients for 25 years. I about fell over when I read her book. I was like, thank God someone's finally having the conversation. Hormones are not a deficient, like problems with libido, problems with, your bone health, your cardiovascular health, your mental health, problems with your energy. They're not about deficiencies in your estrogen or your testosterone, ladies and gents. It is about too much insulin. It is about too little oxytocin. And it's about too much cortisol. And when you bring those into balance, guess what just naturally sprouts up from that new remediated, healthy, regenerated soil is the more balance of your internal hormone system. And that's where you start to say, so how I've practiced for decades with my patients is to help them correct those 3 things. And guess what? Libido's back on, sexual sensitivity's back on, their night sweats are gone, they're sleeping better, they're dealing with stress better, their weight's managed, their bones are healthier than they've ever been before. This is some things. So Mindy's book is a really good review. It's a very simple read on this. But that's where I wish people would start to look deeper, because we are swimming in so much now that the little bit you might be taking in from your well-meaning hormone replacement therapy support is more like insult to injury, because it's like it comes in and the messenger signal gets wonky. And then that spills into stress response and circadian rhythm. We are so out of rhythm today. Oh my word. I'm standing here in front of a screen as the sun's going down. We haven't seen sun in 3 days from fire smoke, but also how many of us are just attached to our blue lights, which are changing our metabolism, changing our pineal gland, changing our melatonin levels, changing our neurochemistry and how we relate in the world, shutting down oxytocin, right. Increasing insulin, increasing cortisol. Every time I see a social media post about what's going on in the world, my insulin goes up, my cortisol goes up, right? And so stress and circadian rhythms are huge. We all have stress all the time, and we always will. Even good stress has the same physiology in our body. So
I tell them every day, your body doesn't know the difference between a baby being born and a death or a divorce or an affair. The body doesn't know. The body does not know the difference between good and bad stress. And yes.
And over time, it just says, like, even if it comes in good, your body's like, that's bad. Because it's just like more of the same. It's staying in this chronic level of stress that's damaging us, good or bad. Yes. So we kind of want to work more towards this equanimity, this balance, this place where we have an opportunity to move gently into, our parasympathetic versus our sympathetic nervous systems. Ease. And like, we're supposed to be in parasympathetic when we go to bed. But if you're not sleeping, you're crammed in the sympathetic, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And if you're crammed and sympathetic, guess what? You don't stop to take a poop.
No.
You know, if you're stressed, you don't have a libido. You're not going to like, let's get down and get funky. You're not going to have an orgasm if you're under stress. You're not going to be able to perform like all those things. So now I'm hoping people start to realize that all the things they have been blaming on hormone imbalance are likely probably much more related to connection imbalance with another. You know, because oftentimes I'll ask you like, oh, your libido's okay. Well, what's going on in your marriage or your relationship or whatever? And they're like, kind of want to put them in a sack and beat them right now.
Ask them, you know, do you like your husband? I mean, and many times, no, they love him, but they don't like him. I mean, it's the same. My mother told me last week, and this was not dementia. I mean, it's the same thing. She goes, you know, I never have liked you, which you don't know. Story. Anyway, she never has really, but she goes, I love you, Dani, but I never have liked you. And I just, and okay. And so, which was a dagger. But anyway, I hear this with my women as men. You know, no, I don't like him. I really don't like him right now, or I just don't like him, but I do love him. And there's nothing like that, squelching a libido quicker than anything. Fire. Man will fight with you to the death in the kitchen and screw you all the way down the hall. I mean, that's what they want to do. I mean, they're so different than women. If a woman is mad at you, they're not going to have sex with you.
But here's the way I saw someone say, this is so sad. But I tell you, a book that changed my perspective, and the irony was that it was my husband who bought the book, and we read it together, was John Gray's new book, Women Are on Venus on Fire, Mars on Ice. Basically, John Gray says, ignore all my early work. The men are from Mars, women are from Venus. Like, ignore that. We've learned a lot since then. Read this new one because it's basically based on the physiology and the biochemistry of us as individuals, as male and female, and how we interrelate. Whether you're in a female-female relationship, a male-female relationship, a male-male relationship, it's so powerful to know this because what it came down to, again, as you just heard me talk about our hormones in general, oxytocin.
Yes.
And cortisol, like it's such a player in this. So if women today are all stepping into this role of, I can do everything. I can bring home the bacon. I can cook it in the pan, like all the things we do today, just because we can, maybe doesn't mean we should.
That's right.
Or maybe reprioritize or reorganize it so we can do it with a little more grace and elegance. But when we're in that place of doing everything for everyone, the last thing on our to-do list is your partner. Okay. And so those are things. And for men, when they're not in the place of providing or taking care of or fixing, their libidos go away because now they're not needed.
That's right.
And other pieces. So these patterns, and he breaks it down to the physiology, which I think is fascinating. So you start to understand. So when you start to understand it from that level, it gets the emotion, it gets the sort of, behaviors out of the way, and it helps you start to come to each other in a different way. Sure. So it's very fascinating. Yeah.
It is fascinating. Wow. Yeah. I'll tell you what, another book, and then we got to get on to this, that Come As You Are. Do you know this? Emily Nagoski. I'm going to try to get her. Come As You Are. It is a book on women, on the science of sex and sexuality. And I would love it. And basically what she's saying is everyone's normal. You're normal. You're not abnormal because you don't want sex. You're not abnormal because your labia, one side's hanging down longer than the other. That's normal. Everybody has parts, pieces, and piece of it. They're just put together differently sometimes. And we're all normal. And you have to work with your normal. And it's just the most fascinating book I've ever read. Some women have a huge libido. Some women don't. Some women had a great sex drive before their children. Some didn't. That's normal. You're okay.
Yeah.
Normal. Oh, it's fascinating. You need to read it.
I'm definitely going to. I've got that. I just wrote her down. So that's on my to-do. But that even segues, because when you're in that place of we've talked about all the different things in the bucket, the final thing in the bucket is really about the mental emotional. And if you are feeling like you're, like I saw somebody mention here, doing it all the time, you're going to start to take its toll mentally and emotionally, those drops in the bucket. And then vice versa, if you are dealing with mental emotional issues, you're not going to be as able to keep the rest of your diet and lifestyle going as well. They feed into each other. And so the idea is that with this book and with this history of my own life and helping tens of thousands of patients on this journey, I help people do their own audit. In the front of the book, we have that 10-part questionnaire asking several questions under each of these 10 drops we just talked about, so that you can basically take that questionnaire and go, those are some blind spots. Didn't know that about myself. Okay, look, out of all 10, these 3 are in the top, are the top 3. Start there. Because this book is a reference. It's not like a sit down light read in the bathroom. It is almost 300 medical references to boot, right? And it's written in a very friendly way, but there's a lot of science, a lot of explanation. So I want people to start with their own priority. If you just go and let's say it's hormones for you, start with that chapter. Okay. And start the recommendations, the testing, the evaluation, the understanding of that part of yourself. And guess what? As I said before, even addressing a single drop in the bucket addresses the whole bucket. And so you'll make strides on the whole process from whatever point you start. And that's where I want people to start to feel this hope, is that, okay, I didn't know what I didn't know, but now that I know, I got to do something different. And that's what we hoped this book would be, is a guide to help people start to pull themselves out of the weeds themselves, not wait for someone to do it for them. Because if you wait for that, it's going to be too late.
You did.
Yeah.
Bingo.
Yeah.
Bingo.
Yeah.
If you were just a random person watching who's not a patient of mine, not a patient of yours, what labs would you want checked? What labs? Because I think people don't know that, and I get new patients all the time. I have 2 new ones tomorrow, and I've got their records from their other providers, and it's wonderful. There's nothing on there.
I think exactly. And they always say, you're fine.
Oh, you're normal. Everything's perfect. This is perfect. Your D3 is 31. It's totally normal. Your homocysteine is 11.9. It's normal.
Right. Yeah. Right.
And so what would you, just the average person.
Sure.
And go check their own labs, or they go to their provider and request? What would you have checked?
Sure. Well, first, I think it's important to qualify, and you know this, and you probably teach your clients this always, is that labs are based on the average of the population.
Yeah.
You do not want to be average on the lab ranges that they're giving you. Okay. So working with someone who's been trained in functional or optimal lab ranges is key, because I'm the person who's going to look at your labs. All of your doctors have sent you that "you're fine" letter, or just said they're good. I will take that. Like a couple of my co-founders for this hospital, for instance, they wanted me to give an example of what it's like to look at their labs. One of them, I spent 7 pages telling him what was going on with him, that he's been to dozens of doctors over many years, including Hopkins, including the best of the best in functional medicine, so from standard of care to functional to other alternative therapies, everything. And no one picked up on some of the most obvious things for him. So it was like, that's really frightening to me. So that's part of why I'm training these doctors now, is helping them be as critical thinkers about labs as I've become over my 30 years. This is the part where I geek out, because to me, data is a driver. It's a motivator. It's also a metric and ways to show me if I'm improving or not improving, or whether that expensive therapy I'm doing is working or not, and so it helps drive me. But basically knowing that your labs are averaged based on the average of the population. Please don't ever be average. You really want to work with someone who understands optimal levels of function. So where I start is every single patient, while I was in private practice for 17 years, we had something called the 9R Health Fair in Colorado. And this was every spring, all over the community, like all over the county, and like schools and little places all over, they would have these blood draws where you'd come in. It was like $60 would get you a whole range of tests. So every spring, I basically did an assessment on the outcomes of these tests. It would take 2 to 5 weeks to get those results back. And I would just be slammed with hundreds of patients for a couple months on end following that spring. It was my favorite part of my year. For me, it was like unwrapping Christmas presents. For them, it was probably horrifying, because I'm like, you're screwed. Not really, I didn't do that. But I'm like, wow, the things I would find was just amazing. And so those basic tests on that $60 test then, because you can arrange co-labs, to get cheaper labs. But basically that was your CBC with differential, which is your complete blood count we talked about earlier. Your metabolic panel, which includes your electrolytes and your general organ function, okay, and your levels of acidosis. And then your C-reactive protein, we talked about that marker of inflammation. On this particular test, they would also run just a simple old TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. For me, that's kind of a waste by itself, but it's a starting point. And then a vitamin D3 and then a hemoglobin A1C. That's what was run with our annual test. That's a pretty thorough dang test. And so that's showing me metabolic function, that's showing me organ function, that's showing me nutritional function, immune function, that's showing me whether there's a disease process on board already or one brewing. And it also is a starting point, because it will often point us to say, we got to dig a little deeper on this, this, and this, because this showed up, right? So, but those are good places to start. So for instance, we want a D3 typically between 50 and 80 if you're not dealing with a chronic illness, and 80 to 120 if you are, depending on the situation. And some of the epigenetics might vary, but I could probably count on one hand how many people couldn't tolerate those higher levels for a disease process out of thousands and thousands in my career. An A1C for all of us, I don't care if you've got cancer, I don't care if you have diabetes, I don't care if you have Alzheimer's, your A1C needs to be under 5. And so a 5, anything over 5, you are rusting very rapidly. Okay. That's what we're measuring with the hemoglobin A1C is glycosylated end products, which is basically the browning effect of your tissues, which is basically oxidation and rusting of your tissues, which leads to all-cause mortality. That's what ages us. That is our anti-aging serum, is sugar. Right. And so that's the place, is the lower your A1C, frankly, the better all mortality you have and prevention of all chronic illness you have. And now, surprisingly, or not surprisingly, those with the highest glucose levels going into the hospital with COVID are not expected to come out.
That's right.
Or have worse events. So it's like, let this be your barrier to, if you contract this illness, it should be a walk in the park for you. If you are metabolically sound, if you're metabolically flexible, which an A1C is indicative of.
Yes.
Your A1C is higher than that, which it is for over 88% of Americans. This is per a study that came out into October 2018. Over 88% of Americans are metabolically inflexible. What that means is they're oxidized like crazy. They are susceptible to all chronic illness we've discussed here. And they're also the sitting ducks for the COVID crisis. And this is why we have the worst outcomes in the world, because we suck at this part of metabolic flexibility, because we let people like General Mills run the show, and we let the Dietetics Association tell us how to eat. And we don't go back to intuitive. We don't go back to primal. We don't go back to what our grandparents and our great-grandparents and our great-great-grandparents ate. And we start to get dogmatic about diet, and we lose the whole idea that it's supposed to be real food, seasonal food, clean food, as quality as possible, as low glycemic as possible. Those are like the base, those are the common denominators of longevity, and the longevity blue zone people across the world. Quality, right? And so those are simple things. And then that TSH, everybody will be different on that. So I don't ever put too much on that. I always take a look at a deeper dive, especially if I suspect other things here. But ultimately, what I also often look at for patients is ferritin. So I'm looking at iron oxidation, because so many of us take an iron supplement, or it's snuck into our multivitamin, or we're eating too much red meat, especially if we have SNPs around APOE2 or ACSL1, then actually red meat is like a candy bar in your body and causes even more oxidation. So it's important to know your own process. But the other side of the equation for those saying, well, then vegan's best, if you've got a TCF7L2 or you have other SNPs along these pathways, you're just susceptible to diabetes, and that much sugar in that diet's going to kill you just as fast as that piece of meat will. So I want people to get away from the carnivore vegan conversation and get into the real, what is it for you conversation, dig deeper, evaluate your own terrain, and go from there. I know you're a fan of a ketogenic lifestyle. And I don't know as much about that. I'm a huge fan of a Mediterranean lifestyle, and I think the people in the blue zones, the majority of those people eat a Mediterranean lifestyle. So I know there's going to be a way to combine your. I do. And I laugh because I spend a lot of time in Greece. In fact, I've got like my second family there. I've been going there for over 25 years. And this family on this island, I keep threatening them that I'm moving in, and they just won't even notice, because I'll just be picked. They have an organic vineyard, an organic farm. They're a 5-minute walk to the beach. They've lived there. They grew up in this island of Paros for many generations. I've gone to their particular home 4 times, getting ready to go again next year. This is a place when I look at and what they serve me to eat when I'm there. So I want the people who read all the blue zones. There is not a single Greek that's a vegan. Can I just say that right now? I have to basically, I'm like, I actually don't eat that much meat. As the one I'm always had to tell my Greek family, I'm like, I'll eat as much fish as you want to cram in me, but please, like the lamb, I can maybe tolerate once a month. The red meat, maybe once a month. A little bit of chicken here and there, but really I'm a seafood kind of gal, maybe some eggs. I can do really well now that I've taken grains out of my diet. I do really, really well now with the raw, really high quality, high fat dairy products that I couldn't eat for 15 years. So in my N equals when I started to learn for myself, but I'm also looking at the demographic of these blue zones and met dozens of centenarians on these islands over the years, and they all mow down on dairy and meat on a regular basis. But it's the fact that in the Greek Orthodox culture, they also fast up to 200 days a year. That's probably very significant. Duh. Number 2, it's who they're spending their time with when they're eating. It's a community, baby. It is like,
their meals are community. You guys, I preach this every single day to you. I was in Italy, and I'll be in Greece next summer as well. I was supposed to have been there this summer. I know, but it's all about community. Their meals, they're laughing, they're carrying on, they're spending time, they're drinking some wine.
Absolutely. They're out there like, we're making the wine. We're picking
my gosh. And it's about community, and your inflammation goes down when you're laughing and when you're with people you love. And, it's another tragic thing about what's going on right now with us, right? So going on about, they eat real food,
and what they can grow, what's seasonal, what's local, what's real. This is an island. They're going to have predominantly a fish-based diet.
Yes.
They don't have enough. It's such an arid climate. They're not raising grains. These folks are living on massive amounts of vegetables, right? They are like that. That is not the predominant focus. We in the West have made grains like, well, Mediterranean diet just means lots and lots of pasta. No, it doesn't. Guess what? The highest rate of celiac disease is in those who were evolved from the Fertile Crescent, which is the whole Mediterranean. That includes Italy, Greece, Turkey. All of those areas actually have the highest rates of celiac in the world. And many of them ignore it because of the opiate effect of the glutamorphogens that make it addictive for them. And they're just suffering from a lot of the conditions that we suffer from. In fact, my family in Greece, they all are dealing with Hashimoto's autoimmune thyroiditis. And I've gotten the whole family, they've now found a baker who makes them a psyllium husk-based bread that is so divine. I actually look forward to going to this island because it's the best bread I've ever eaten. And it's not only gluten-free, it's even keto friendly for those who carb. I know, right? But also in Italy, if you go to Italy, they have like mastered the art of gluten-free cooking and gluten-free pastas. We're getting better in the US, but man almighty, because it has been like part of their culture. So like, well, we better make it taste good if we're going to find an alternative for our population that's ailing from this genetic condition. And so those are really powerful. What I've coined this thing we're talking about right now is my own version of the CDC, which the world calls the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, which just, I call it my CDC, my Centers of Disease Control is circadian rhythm, diet, and community.
Oh, well, well, those are 3 of my 6 steps, right? So
you dig that.
Circadian rhythm, diet, and community. There you go. There's Dr. Nasha's CDC. I love it.
Yes, we might have a little better advice for you than what they're offering right now.
Amen to that. Amen to that. Angie, what did you say here? You said, do you subscribe? What's it say? I don't have my glasses on.
So the fast versus slow oxidizers and the different foods. It's a piece of the puzzle that I'll look at, but I can see that from people's metabolic profiles. So if you're eating a lot of carbohydrates and your blood markers look gorgeous and you have no, autoimmune conditions, or you're not dealing with any issues that could be driving forces to certain chronic illness, then you're probably a fast oxidizer and you're probably tolerating that fine. But that's a very small percent of the population. And yet the other side to be true is I have a lot of people who will say, I eat this diet and I feel great on it. And then we'll run their labs. And I'm like, sometimes we wish ourselves into eating a way we want to keep eating a certain way. So I tell people, get out of your own way, get out of your own dogma and do the testing. Just know how it's working for you. Is that diet working? Because I will tell you, as a recovered vegan and a recovering vegetarian, for 7 years, I was hardcore vegan because that's how I thought I needed to treat my cancer. Because that's all. In 1991, there was no Dr. Google. And the only information I had about how to treat cancer was a vegan, like a Gerson-based diet. Now, I was reading Father Gerson's work, not the more modern version. So at least I was getting my liver and things in, and that's probably what saved my life. If I had gone full on Gerson of today, I would have died decades ago. I also, because I was so sick in the beginning, what probably saved my life the most was over 2 months of complete fasting because I had a bowel obstruction and I had such fluid in my abdomen I couldn't eat. And so that probably saved my life from what we're catching up now, nearly 30 years later, on the data of fasting in helping slow down apoptosis. It helped my body absorb all that ascites, malignant fluid. It helped my organs rest and reset because I was in complete organ failure. And because I was so sick, they couldn't give me any treatment. So they sent me to die. So at that point, everyone had washed their hands of me. So I was really on my own. And I'll tell you right now, that's probably also what saved my life. And not to say I'm against what Western medicine could offer, but I would know how to help somebody like me today, as well as help them get the best of standard of care when it's applied appropriately and carefully and elegantly to that person's needs in the moment. But I tell you, if I'd gone and jumped right into the standard of care bandwagon, especially in 91, when we were still using mega doses of things, they would have killed me on the first go. And they told me that. That's why it wasn't an offering. So I'm wanting folks to hear that I'm not anti-standard of care. In fact, this hospital we're building is literally, yeah. So the Believe Big Institute of Health has been a dream. I started having this dream. I guess I'll call it a dream. Sorry?
What's the name of it?
Believe Big Institute of Health.
Believe Big Institute of Health. Okay.
That's our working name for now. We feel like will be the landing name, but it's based on a whole reasoning why we've come to this place. But in about 6 months into my diagnosis, started having these incredibly vivid dreams. And of course, I'm still thinking I'm going to die. They told me I had 3 to 6 months. I'm sure I'm done for this world. I started having these unbelievable dreams and basically an awareness of this place in the desert. And I'm thinking, am I having like a metaphorical, like 40 days, 40 nights in the desert experience? I wasn't sure, but I was kind of going with it, started jotting down notes, images, ideas, thoughts, messages that were coming through. That list has evolved and added to over nearly the 29 years that I've been on this journey. And it started taking shape and form about 10, 15 years ago. So about 10 years into this process, I started to see what this was, that it was a center, that it was a hospital, not just a clinic, because I ran a very successful integrative cancer clinic for many, many years. And I had patients coming from all over the world. But I knew that model wasn't enough. There are thousands of those around this country and all over the world. And that's not enough because it's still an us against them. And then when patients go out of the country to places in Mexico or Europe, first of all, that's scary to leave your home. Most Americans don't have passports. The cost is prohibitive for most people. And often those environments are very anti-standard of care. They don't do testing. They don't really stay up with the latest research. A lot of them say they're offering really high-end therapies, but they're pretty antiquated. A lot of them are still doing therapies that they've been offering 30, 40 years ago. And so I started to imagine a place where we had the best of both worlds all under one roof. Now, some people think that's CTCA, Cancer Center Treatments of America. That's how it started. That was the idea of it back in the 90s, but it quickly got usurped into the standard of care model. And naturopaths were initially at the table, and then they were put at the kids' table, and then they were put out on a folding table in the garage, and soon they'll not even be in the neighborhood, right? So that's where it's going. We were marketing at best for them. And really, it's just the same kind of, as we said, you quoted me earlier, lipstick on a pig version of oncology. We have 76 centers in this country calling themselves integrative cancer centers, but I call them low-hanging fruit centers. It's like, great, we know Reiki is helpful. We know acupuncture is helpful. We know stress management is helpful. Can we actually start talking about the proper testing and the re-visioning of how we apply chemotherapy, or the timing in which we apply targeted therapies, or how we utilize true precision medicine and tissue assays to determine the best way? And when we look at their epigenetics, we'll know exactly how they're going to respond to that drug and adjust accordingly. Can we maybe look at some other therapies that can enhance outcomes, certain IV therapies like IV vitamin C, or even fasting with all of these therapies to drive the treatment in deeper while protecting the healthy cells? Or maybe utilizing hyperbaric oxygen along with radiation therapy, but even using a form of radiation that's not yet available globally in this country outside of research, which is this carbon ion radiation I've been sending patients to for 10 freaking years in Southeast Asia, which is, it basically almost acts like an immune stimulant. So talk about the immunotherapies. It's such a low dose and so carefully applied and so focal that it doesn't have the same tissue destruction of what we're using in this country. And now it's now just a research model in Florida. We're going to have that in this dang hospital, for crying out loud. And like all of these other therapies that are not utilized. I send patients abroad for photodynamic therapy, where they're putting, lasers with radiosensitizers right into the tumors and watching them dissolve before our very eyes, or injecting mistletoe right into a portal vein to treat hepatic carcinomas. I mean, we're seeing these happening in hospital institutions around the world. And yet in this country, we're in a phase 1 clinical trial on safety of mistletoe, for crying out loud, where our colleagues are kicking ass and taking names by putting mistletoe right into the tumor itself. It drives me stinking crazy that we have to go through and spend $2.5 million to say, yeah, this is safe, to be like, everybody else in the world has it covered by insurance or part of their medical system or some add-on to their medical system. And yet we're so far behind in this country. So yeah, it's a doozy what this hospital is going to be about. It's also going to be built on hundreds of acres of regenerative farming land. We're going to have raise all of our own food, we want to amend the soil, regenerate the soil, because we are a reflection of what's going on in the soil of our planet today.
You bet.
And so we have to teach people, we have to create a model that shows them how to live in accordance with our very true nature. And so this hospital is that. It is also a research institute. So it's all under a giant IRB, so people will know they're coming in their research arms. We also are collecting all of our data in real time so we can show the outcomes. We are giving them the model that they want to show that these therapies work or don't work. We're bringing in the best vetted therapies from around the world. And we're doing so in an environment that is philanthropically donations, research dollars, cash pay, some insurance. It's both a for-profit and some not-for-profit models. And frankly, all we need are a few $100 million to get the whole thing off the ground. So I know because we actually had someone offer us the whole purchase price, like the whole creation of this, but they wanted ownership. And I'm like, no, if someone's telling me that, they know we have something. And if you even knew who the company was or the group was, you would know what this is about. It's like, let's shut this down before it gets started. Let's give them $200 million, own the 51% and shut it down before it gets started, because they know that the writing's on the wall. This will be the first center. We are training physicians right now. By the time we open the doors, we'll have 250 trained worldwide. We hope to have centers of excellence models all over the world. We're looking at developing this model all over the world. This isn't just about changing cancer. This is about changing healthcare as we know it. This is what I came here to do. This is why God gave me the burden of ovarian cancer at 19 years old, coming from the crazy world that I grew up in and continue to be exposed to today, to change things for others, because I don't have kids and this is my legacy. And I'd like to see the next couple generations have a chance, because we don't right now.
Oh my gosh. I mean, that I don't get brought to tears very often, but that's, yeah, phenomenal. Where's this going to be?
It's going to be in Southern. Oh, where'd you go? I lost your beautiful face. I'm all alone now. Did they just shut us down? Oh my goodness, making sure you guys can see me. Where'd you go? If you guys can see me, will someone say something? That's so weird. Let's see. I don't know how to chat. Okay. Oh, good. Thank you. Someone said you're going to thank you. Good. I'm like alone here without the captain of my ships. Well, oh, hey, Dr. Dudley. There's one of the people that's changing this world is Dr. Stephen Dudley. So I hope that's okay to give you a shout out. And I saw Dr. Michelle Rojas up there as well. So if you guys see these beautiful Rojo, sorry. I'm thinking Rojas. Good. But it's going to be in Arizona, in southern Arizona. And while I see and hear all of you giving me the shout out on this, the reason why we chose Arizona is it has one of the broadest scopes of practice in the country. It's also got, of the three states that have the broadest scope of practice, Arizona, Nevada, and California being those three. No one wanted to live in Nevada. California was way too expensive, and right now it's all on fire. And so we decided to go with a state that has very evolved medical process. So as a naturopath there in my training, I trained with MDs and DOs and acupuncturists, and they trained with us, and we all really circled the bend together. We're all very in it together in that state. It's very open-minded. It's also got a great climate where we're going to be. We're going to be south of Tucson in an area up in the hills that still have more temperate summers compared. It can still get hot during the day, but it can cool down. We'll be able to have a year-round growing season, and we'll be within 25 minutes from an international airport. Okay, thanks you guys. I'm not sure what happened to all of us, but, oh, we're back? Okay, voice is back, but I don't see Dani, so hopefully she's here somewhere. Oh, good, 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 good. Yay. Okay, guys, well, I'm gonna watch all these messages start flying in right now, so hopefully if there's follow-up questions, I would love for you to send them to me or to Dani, and we'll get them answered for you, but I'm incredibly grateful to all of you for letting me join you on your late evening at this point. So I'm going to take off because this is weird, all by myself, talking to a camera screen. And may you and yours continue to thrive. And I'm here to answer any other questions that come up after this very engaging conversation. And I wish you all the best. Thanks, everybody. Be well.